Let's talk applique stitches for the Pfaff Ambition 620 sewing machine. So you're going to notice that if you want a satin stitch, most people reach for a zigzag, stitch number 5. So if you pick stitch number 5, and that's all good, and then you go to shorten it down, but then it doesn't let you really get it short enough. It doesn't really close up the zigzag to turn it into a satin stitch. And that's because there is a built-in satin stitch. Pick stitch number 6 and watch the difference. So first off, it is going to recommend foot 2A, which I love. That's the one that comes with this machine. If you prefer, which I actually do, an open toe foot, work with your local Pfaff retailer for an open toe foot for this machine, and then it doesn't have the plastic in front of the needle. It lets you see the needle and the edge of the fabric that you're following really easy. Now, one thing I do notice about the built-in satin stitch is it comes in really wide. That is width of 6 millimeters is usually more than I am going to need at any given time. I like more of a 3.5 or 4, somewhere 2 to 4, so you can find what the width is that you like. Let's just start at a 3, but look what the stitch length starts at, 0.8. So depending on my thread thickness, I might shorten that up just a little bit further. You can see it gets really dense on the screen as you change it. 0.8 is a great place to start. Now we talk about how to guide the fabric, and let's look at all the lines that you find on foot 2A. Now don't forget, you do need to have stabilizer underneath the fabric to help give it a nice flat finish, and the IDT has been removed. Notice the tension has also been reduced, so it's going to nicely pull those stitches to the back side, so you have the prettiest rounded satin stitch on the top of your fabric. Like anything, satin stitching will take a little practice, whether you need to get around corners or actually follow a curve. But once you start stitching, you're going to notice that the lines on the feet, so this one I just lined up the raw edge of the fabric with the center edge of the foot, so the center line, and then go ahead and stitch. Now I am going to reduce the stitch length one touch of the button just to show you the difference that you'll see on here. Now just because we think of a satin stitch with a zigzag does not mean that this is the only stitch in this machine that you would use, because you're going to find that there are other decorative stitches that you could have easily encased this raw edge with that would have a little bit more interest than just a straight zigzag. So do you see the difference when we switched from the stitch length that we started with to the slightly denser one? So we were at 0.8 during the first little bit, which was fine, didn't look bad, but then you compare it to when we did close it up a little bit further, how much prettier that is. And I'm all about a very dense satin stitch, but you are going to need to determine that based on the thickness of thread that you have chosen for your edge and the stitch that you're doing. Now, try out those other decorative stitches. Make sure you try making a stitch book. Stitch out all your decorative stitches and see how pretty some of these stitches would look along this edge and give it a little bit more interest. Next up, let's talk about blanket stitch applique.